to the Leadership Shift, the podcast where we explore the transformative journey from management and control to leadership and inspiration. I'm Aurélien Mangano, and I believe there is moment in every leader's career, sometimes quiet, sometimes dramatic, where everything changes. It's not about becoming a better manager. It's about a fundamental shift from managing tasks and controlling outcome to inspiring people and creating possibility. Today, I am joined by Andrew Sercombe, founded the Power Change in 2000.
Powerchange.com, yeah.
Yeah, powerchange.com. Okay. In 2000, after a career in education and leading a pastoral charity. For over 3 decades, he is specialized in personal development coaching that literally reset how clients think and live daily. His unique approach has taken him from across 49 countries, working with everyone from healthcare professional and business leader to student and retired. I would like to welcome you, Andrew, and tell me more about all this journey.
Well, I feel a very slight fraud listening to that because although I have done loads of training on all sorts of different countries, including the States and various other places, but the major work that I've done on traveling in terms of trips was a motorbike trip that I did. I've done 40 countries in Europe. I've covered just about every country in Europe with a tent on a motorbike. And so that's the sort of more adventurous side of me and my life. Yeah. But I've been to China, worked in China, smuggled stuff into China actually, but you don't need to know about that today. Deliberately, because China, when I was doing that, was a very, very closed country, and it's so much different now. And really, really enjoyed my work. I started off as a teacher, teaching design technology to teenagers. Then I worked as a pastor of a church, a happy clappy church in our local village. And 25 years ago, 30 years ago now, I stopped doing that and developed Power Change from scratch. Although having said that, we started the church from scratch. So that was actually quite a powerful leadership role to play because you're working with 100 volunteers. So you have to have a particular skill in doing that. And working with Power Change, of course, I've developed over the years a team of people, trained coaches for 10 years in a 24-day coach training program. So my speciality is coaching. And if you look at all my promo literature, it says, Andrew doesn't do shallow. And that pretty much sums up my attitude, both to leadership and life.
Yeah. So there is a lot of experience in leadership. I mean, I want to speak with so many things and I don't know where to start, but let's start with the leadership with volunteers, because when you build a church, the leadership is very different than when you are in a company, you are paid, people have all their energy and their money into the game of building the company. But when it is a church, it is more volunteer. So what do you see really different in the leadership when you have to lead people without incentive of money, just volunteering?
You do have an incentive, of course, but it's not money. The people who come on board in those sorts of things have got their own motive. They have a faith and they want to promote it. And so there's that connection, which is quite strong. I guess leadership for me started when I was a teenager because I was involved in young people's groups and stuff like that years ago, and I'm 75 now, so that's about sort of 60 years ago. And I think the number one quality that I have is to be able to lead your own life and to lead it with dignity, strength, moral structure. those sorts of values. People talk about values these days in quite a sort of light way, but the values that really matter, a deep sense of personal trust, being able to trust yourself, being trustworthy, these are things that are very important. Um, and particularly in a church context, there's all sorts of doctrinal stuff that can become very complicated. And I found that out at a later date. But we started from nothing in our home. So we had 13 people in our home and eventually moved to various stages to the biggest hall in the area, with a lot of people. So, and again, you're working with a team of people who are doing pastoral care. We had a leadership meeting every Monday night. There were those sorts of things going on that where you're building vision, building character, developing people, paying attention to them, and the word paying attention, or those two words, people like the word attention, but they're not quite sure about the word pay. And in fact, when you are developing people, coaching people, it has to be a cost involved, both for that person and yourself. Otherwise, it's just cheap, and we don't do cheap. So,
Yeah. And so I have a few clients, and some of them understand the difference between management and leadership. Is there a difference for you between what is management and what is leadership? And what is your definition?
Well, to start with, Aurelian, I'm very nervous about being too definitive about definitions, because I think there is clearly an overlap, isn't there, between those two things. When you're starting a small organization, you have to do the management and the leadership. But as you get older, the group gets bigger, or the business gets bigger. And as you probably know, I've written two books, one on leadership and one on building a business. So, as the organization gets bigger, you can leave some of the management to other people, but the key leaders have to have a clear sense of vision and have to be proven trustworthy. We talk about one of the jokes in Britain, I don't know whether you have it where you are, but say, trust me, I'm a doctor. Well, of course, these days we're an awful lot more nervous about trusting doctors. Or trust me, I had one guy say to me, trust me, I'm a financial advisor, which I thought was hilarious. But anyway, proving trustworthiness is being there when it hurts and paying the price, paying attention, giving yourself. Those are the sort of qualities that I've worked with leaders over the years. And for me personally, I've always done it with them as an individual. I was working with a car renting company, a big one, one day, and I was asked to help with their leadership organization, because it was pretty much a mess. And I just said, well, I'd like to speak to 6 people privately in your team. And he said, well, I'll sort that. I said, no, I will choose them. Because I wanted to choose people who might not say what the boss wanted them to say, who are going to be honest with me, and that needed to be a confidential conversation that they knew wasn't going anywhere else. And yes, I saved them a lot of money doing that. The boss said to me afterwards, he said, I have to say, this is the best report we've ever had in this company. And I was really chuffed with that, I must say.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, we know each other a lot, so I know how good you are asking the question and making people very aware of what they are thinking.
Yeah. And one of my lines, Aurelian, one of my lines is, what you see is what you get, and this is all there is. Because I'm Andrew Sercombe. I'm a fallible person. I make mistakes. However, I'm also adventurous and courageous. And I think the 3 top values that I look for in people are truth, love, and courage. It's what I call TLC, we call tender loving care over here. I don't know whether you do where you are, but TLC for me stands for truth, love, and courage. And those 3 values are massively high for me.
Okay. And do you need these quality values into leadership, or it is just in life that you need this?
Well, you see, I would remove the word just. You see,
Ah,
I don't think it's a matter of just. I think if you want people to follow you, you have to be worthy of being followed. And if you want to check what sort of a leader you are, see who's following. You know, if people aren't following you, then you're not being a leader, you know. And if you're not allowing those deep inner values, those deep inner moral values to guide you, then you won't be trusting yourself much either. Because what happens is we have to trust ourselves first of all. Yeah. Next
yeah.
question.
No, no, very good. So we were speaking about your trip that you do once a year, about a month in bicycle. And actually, it's something that probably not many people that know you know about you. But every year you do a bicycle trip in Europe, usually just bike and tent. What does it bring to you? And is it
What
something
does,
that you,
can you say that
what
again?
does
What
it
does,
bring to you?
oh.
And do you recommend this for your leaders?
Yeah, buy a motorbike. um, I think one of the reasons why I tend to do a trip is because it takes you out of the context that you normally work in and gives you a different frame, a different environment where you don't feel secure, and that's really important. You know, one of my jokes is I say I'm very secure in the knowledge of my insecurities. Um, because we all have insecurities, and on a motorbike, you have a lot more insecurities than you probably imagine most of the time. And I've done that consistently with a tent. So you're out in the wild, camping wild. I don't really use campsites very often unless I have to. But that takes you out into a place of isolation in terms of um, a motorbike. I don't go with anybody else. I go on my own. It gives me thinking space. Every character profiling thing that I've done, you know them all. I come out as a thinker, which is about sort of 2.5% of the entire population or something, because I like to think things through properly. I don't like things going off half cock. I want things to be. I want to be clear in my own mind, so that I can pursue something, and that is a very useful thing to be developing and thinking out in the wild. You know, like the countryside behind me. Um, Thinking out in the wild is a very well, it teaches you self-reliance. You know, when the bike breaks down or you come off it, as I have done a number of times, if you're conscious, as I have also been knocked once or twice, um, you are in a situation where you have got to think for yourself, and I think that for me that's a very useful thing. My parents were farmers, so again, out in the fields and on the farm, when you're with a tractor and a machine in the middle of nowhere, and something breaks or something doesn't work properly, or you come across something that you don't handle very well, or you don't have not come across before, you have to think for yourself, and that's another quality of leadership.
Yeah,
Does that help? Does that answer your question?
totally. I mean, it works very well. I mean, I see what it is. Huh? And I really think that it is essential to really have the time to think for yourself. And sometimes I'm just this morning, I was, oh my God, I have so many things to do. I don't have time to think because I have things to do. And I really look for time to give me the time to expand. And a month
Yeah.
is what
Aurelian,
I need, but it's
that's
not
part of
easy to have it.
that's part of paying attention, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
you have to
yeah,
pay, and the
exactly.
paying is you won't earn so much money, but you will produce a better quality of leadership. Um,
Exactly.
and and that again is one of the things I'm very keen on. Um, Write it in your diary. write Aurelian in the diary, or if you've got other people who see that, excuse me, then find some clever word that they're not going to stop and think out. Out of office is a very good one, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And actually, I block one day in my week totally to do what I want, to be out and think and allow myself to have this time to process everything that I need to
Yes.
process.
I think one day a week is a good start, but
Yeah.
I think you need more time than that, because very often when you are wanting to pursue something, it takes a day to get rid of all the rubbish that's been banging around in your, well, it's probably not rubbish, but banging around in your head in the first place, in order to be able to think cleanly. Um, because it's very, very easy to con ourselves. It's very easy for us to think, oh, that's obviously the best decision. And we haven't really considered properly what that decision is. Again, a good leader and a good manager to a degree, but a good leader will look further ahead. He'll look further down the track. He'll see where the mountains are, not just where the next gate is. And he will start to prepare for that. And you know as well as I do that any person who's done really serious adventuring, people who've walked or climbed mountains and stuff, they sometimes do months and months of preparation before they get there, which generally speaking is not paid preparation. There is a price to pay, and paying attention to these things is what really counts. What people don't understand though is that the rewards are so massive. When you've come up with an absolutely brilliant solution and not just 20 bright ideas, the sense of joy, the sense of fulfillment, the sense of reward, and the commendations from other people are very rewarding for that price you pay. And that for me is really important. I love to feel that what I'm providing is of the best quality. It's
Yeah.
not always, but I like it to be.
Yeah. So you
Excuse
tell
me, I've got a
that
bit of cough
as
today.
a leader, you need to have a vision. How can a person that want to be a leader can develop this vision? I mean, how can you have this muscle of being a good visionary person? Do you have any advice for it?
Yes, know yourself.
So it
That
starts
would be
with
the advice.
self-awareness.
That's what I would say. I would say the best sort of vision you could have is something that takes you deep, deep down into your soul. Something that is more than personally rewarding. Something that provides a triple win. That's I win, you win, they win.
Okay.
That's so because if it's just it's like you and I having this conversation here. If it's just you and I that gain from this conversation, that's almost incestuous. But if we know that there are now going to be tens, hundreds, thousands of people who are also gaining from it, suddenly it has different meaning. It has a stronger meaning. And that for me is really important.
Yeah. So I see a lot of people that are in leadership that don't take the time to know themselves. They are too much in the rhythm of the work. They are always busy. I have also some session with people that tell, oh, I don't have time because I have my work, and they don't take the time to have the coaching session. That is, as we know, a lot of awareness development. So what would you tell to these people to tell them how important is awareness for you? And is there any experience in your life that demonstrates this need of awareness and how it has result in your life?
Yeah, we won't get to that on the 20-minute conversation on here though. The difficulty is if I start on any one of those, I will need to complete the story, and we don't have time for that. So I would say that there are probably, well, there's about 4 times in my life where I have changed career, for instance, very substantially. And but those changes didn't happen in 2 minutes. Those changes happened over a period of time. Talking to your friends, finding out what's really going on, being brutally honest, and and humble. I think. Let me just be blunt here. I have a very strong belief in a higher power. So I find myself not so much saying, "Oh, I'll do what I like." My question is, does this fulfill my sense of purpose? And that can be, I work with clients time and again, coaching clients in this particular field. And that can be what you may regard as a given purpose, which, if you're CEO of a company, somebody's given you that responsibility. If you're talking about your normal everyday life, which is far, far more important than any CEO job. Because you bring it with you wherever you go. When you leave the office, you've still got you. You still so that sense of purpose for me was very, very clear early on in my life, and that higher authority means you feel accountable too, which again is quite an important thing to feel, because some people feel accountable to their community, some people feel accountable to their family, and we are accountable to all those things. But I think there is a power that is higher than humans, which is God, obviously. So that has an effect on it at all as well. However, having said that, and you'll have noticed from my websites and things that I don't flag that up particularly. And when I'm working with clients, I would ask them about those sorts of things. But if they say, "Oh no, I don't believe in God" or anything like that, that's fine. We work with that. But somewhere along the line, they will have a sense of purpose. And finding out what what am I doing here is a very good question. Like, what's the point is another very good question. And people are frightened of asking those questions for fear that they may not be able to find a satisfactory answer to it. And that affects them profoundly. So, there are those sorts of things that I think are really, really important in terms of leadership. And of course, it comes down, as we said at the beginning, to leading your own life. But when you have that kind of solid foundation, you know what you're doing here, you know the value of human life, you know how to treat people, those sorts of things. The underlying structure of your leadership qualities will shift. It'll shift to a deeper, stronger, richer, more refined, more accepting, more loving basis. Those three things I talked to you about: truth, love, and courage. They go so closely together, because it's no good just having truth and spouting truth out and knowing the truth if there isn't an element of love that's involved. And certainly telling the truth and in fact loving people demands courage. You will have courage. You will need courage. And all those things are like a little triangle of things that depend on each other. And that's one reason why I personally enjoy those as three foundation stones to my own life. As you can tell, I can talk forever.
Yeah, no problem. I'm used of you speaking a lot, Andrew, and I have to tell that I learned a lot from our conversation in the past. I saw several times in my life that my purpose was not clear, and I was following the purpose of my company without understanding it well. Do you think, can a person be effective at his job if he don't understand his own purpose and the purpose of the company?
Of course, he can be effective. Will he enjoy it as much? Will he get satisfaction from it? No, not in the same way. Will his wife or family or partner appreciate it in the same way? Probably not, because we lead our lives in all sorts of different places. So, but that foundation, if you've got a person who has that solid foundation, they will do a better job, all things being equal. If they've got the same training, same experience as somebody who doesn't have that foundation. I've seen it endless times. I've coached hundreds and hundreds of people. So and when they come in and sit in the chair, which is just over here, um, or I'm in London in the middle of a hotel somewhere, that quality, the number one quality that I think I put in on all these things is the pricelessness of human life. For me personally, the fact that I am worth 10 out of 10, and I'm not what I do, and I'm not what I have, those things are really, really important. We are not what we have. We have a body, but we're not that body. We are that something inside it. If you chop somebody's arms off and they go to, they're in a war zone and they lose their legs, they don't become less people just because they have less body. They sometimes they have a deeper understanding of their lives, but again, we're not what we have. We're not our property. As people find out when they are. We've just had the Holocaust Memorial Day over here, and those people just stripped away and had nothing, and but they weren't less people. They were treated as less people, but they weren't less people. And so our value is dependent on us as a human life. And the truth is, you can't stop yourself having a human life, really. I mean, that is the best possible place to put value. Every human being is worth the same. 10 out of 10, priceless is what we call it. I've written a book on this, 23,000 words. Wasn't a very big book, but it's enough to make the point. And but again, that when you understand that, you will treat people differently in your leadership role. Because we're talking about leadership as leading people and leading yourself first of all, and valuing people properly. By the way, it'll bring you into all sorts of conflicts because you'll have all sorts of people who think our value does depend on what we own. And so many people are desperately trying to get more and more property because they don't feel value themselves. That's something in their lives, and very often it's going to school or a trauma or moving, a big house move and losing all their friends when they're pre-10, sometimes pre-5. That completely throws them, and they start thinking that, well, they have parents who say, if you're going to be a good boy or a good girl, you perceive yourself as worth more than a child who is naughty, and parents play on that to control their children. And again, if you've got good qualifications, something you have, reflecting something you've done, not something you are, then you are worth more than a person who doesn't have those things. And of course, that's not true either. Now, what is true is those things may be valuable and people may be buying those things, but that doesn't mean to say they're buying you because you're not for sale.
Mm. I mean, there is a lot in what you are telling me. So I try to absorb and see really all this knowledge and yeah.
That's part of the challenge that I have in terms of communication, Aurelian, because one of the reasons is because I have been over the years, and I'm not bragging about this, but because over the years I have been so thought out. I've spent 75 years thinking, and because I'm reasonably well thought out and still a long way to go, if you come to people who are not used to thinking at that sort of depth, I swamp them, and I have to be careful about how. That's one reason why putting on a video like we're doing now is actually quite a good idea, because the person can replay the video a few times, and say, "Oh, what about that? What about that?"
Perhaps I need to do this, Bobby.
Well, as I said to you before, we've talked about working together in this sometime, and I'd be very happy to do that with you.
Yeah. I mean, sure, we will set a time for this for sure. So,
but I will speak very frankly. Coaching with me is not, oh, Andrew's just such an easy ride. Oh no, it's not going to be like that. But I do love you.
Let's speak about coaching actually, because coaching, I don't think we should be kind or things. We are here to increase the awareness in people. So we are not here
increase the what?
awareness of people, making them more aware of who they are, what they
Awareness of
can
people. Yeah,
do.
sorry. I
Yeah.
missed your accent.
So, yeah. So I don't think we should be just telling yes to everything and following always their lead. Yes, they are on the driving seat, but we need to challenge them. We need to make sure that they are in the growth area and not in the comfort zone.
Yes.
So,
I'm not. I have a sort of love-hate relationship with the word challenge because,
okay.
generally speaking, you don't change people by making them wrong, and we are very quick to make people wrong to demonstrate that we have got something better. But what I'm doing is I'm going deeper inside them to find out what's really there and helping them to think about that so that they can find out what's really there. And if they don't have anything there, they can create something that's going to be there. So my way of approaching that is not what I would call it. I jokingly say I'm only superficial on the surface, right? Um, uh, because you can teach. I've taught woodwork and metalwork to kids, so I teach kids how to make joints, how to draw and design technology stuff. So I can do all that. I can say, no, you need to be putting this line here, and you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. I don't really call that coaching in the way I talk about it now. Coaching now is talking about the values of the work that somebody's doing, how it affects them inside, the reward they get from it, what drives them from there, and how we can direct or redirect or support or increase a rich quality to their life that's going to make a difference. Time and again, when I've coached people come to me and say, I'm not doing very well, blah, 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 and they come up with all this stuff. Even people who have been sent to me by a company, the company is paying. I got one company in mind at the moment where I had 3 people. Well, one of them retired and 2 of them left after they'd been coached by me. And the reason it sounds terrible, doesn't it? And the reason was,
that means you make them select the right choice, take the retirement.
They just, one of them, it took them 4 years to find what I was actually talking about. It wasn't 4 years of coaching, but it was 4 years of us being in contact and having lunch together probably once every 3 months, something like that. One of them left quite quickly. Another one left. And that was all to do with a clash of values and vision and all those things. But it was a big international charity organization. So not a church or religious in that sense at all. So it was a health charity, in fact. And what happened was it became more and more clear that this person's values, they were going to see the boss with their values and want to talk about how the company was not responding in a moral way. And eventually that relationship broke down and they had to leave. And these are quality people. I mean, I'm not talking about people who are just obviously going to be really difficult anyway. I'm talking about quality people, and all 3 of them left. And the charity is still almost running, but it's struggling. And those are the sorts of things that I think are really important when we're talking about leadership, because the leadership of that individual person's life and their family and what they are at home. And of course, there is a price to pay. When you're going to resign and you don't have a job to go to, as one of them didn't, she'd earned a lot of money. So, and I said to her, so how long can you last if you pull out? She said, about 6 months. Well, she actually lasted 4 years. And in that time, I got a phone call from her at 10:30 one night when I was actually in bed. And she said, Andrew, I get it. I understand what you're on about. I get it. I was just so understanding. And that took her about 6 months, 2 months, a bit longer than a year, probably, before she actually got what I was talking about. Because our whole world is governed towards a particular way of being controlled. And the sort of stuff that I'm talking about, self-leadership, is when you are in control of you. And you are able to respond to the world with dignity, with courage, with love and truth. And it'll bring you into endless conflict in all sorts of ways, but you will be thorough and genuine and 100% yourself. And that's what matters in my book. You can go down the road and you can find another coach who'll teach you all the other stuff, but don't come to me for it because I won't. Partly because I cannot see how the world is going to be a better place in the long term from that sort of attitude. And that is fundamental for me. So you can see how that plays out, can't you?
Yeah, very interesting. And I have a training recently about really these two dimensions, and I think it replied to what you tell: control yourself or be controlled by the environment. That is the having the tendency to be reactive. That means you react to the world. You need to be like this because something happened to you, and you reply to it negatively. I mean, it's pulling you down. And there is other way where you are more controlling yourself, being more creative, and it is where you really build the real leadership and make things happen. And it is something that I see very related to what you are telling me right now.
So what question would you ask about that?
I mean, what question is, should we become less influenced by the exterior to be a good leader and become more inside out? Or can we be faking the leadership by learning skills?
I'm not sure I can answer that question exactly because it's an either or one. But what I will say is I think influence is more important than prominence. So influence works two ways. I have an opportunity to influence the world, and I am open to the world influencing me. However, it's not going to influence me beyond my thought out values. Last year, I spent quite a lot of my time. By the way, just notice what I said there. Last year, not yesterday afternoon. Do you see what I mean? I spent a lot of time thinking about the difference between ethics and morality. Because we can do all sorts of things that are ethical, but aren't moral. In other words, as society, we'll agree that this is okay, equals ethics. Knowing deep down inside whether something is right or wrong is moral. And that is actually profoundly important in our world today. And if you take a look out there, you'll see that the vast majority of battles that are going on, wars that are going on, are not the difference between one morality and another, but ethicality and morality. And where people say, oh, well, we need all that land, so we're going to pinch it, without thinking, but that belongs to people whose lives are, and thinking of the consequences. So, yeah, I'm not sure where I've got a bit lost there. You have to drag me back in, kicking and screaming. But you can see how that, having that foundation in that strength, that courage, and courage grows, People say, oh, I haven't got the courage to do that. I haven't got the courage to leave my job. I need the money. You've just surrendered your entire future and probably the example that you're going to be to your children and the people around you to a system which is going to corrupt you and has corrupted many millions of people already. Now, of course, we need resources in order to eat. I'm not naive about that. But I think we need to sometimes step back and think, what sort of person do I want to be before we start thinking, what sort of leader do I want to be? And I'm not pretending I always get it right, Aurelian, because I absolutely do not. Sometimes I do things and say things that I'm embarrassed by, and well, I'm glad nobody knows about. I'm not like that. But we're talking about seeking something. We're talking about facing that direction. We're talking about walking towards that. We're talking about walking towards living a life of truth. But none of us will ever know all the truth. And, who in the right mind would ever consider that? However, I'm seeking it, you see. And it's the seeking truth that keeps you on course, not necessarily arriving at it. And that applies to yourself as well. seeking to be a good personal leader, a leader of myself, self-leadership, is what makes you followable. Because was it Albert Schweitzer said, wasn't it? It was Albert Schweitzer said, example is not the best way to influence people. It's the only way. Because, even if
I like to leave my people that listen these things with this sentence, and if you can repeat it, please repeat it. So I'm sure that
okay, Albert Schweitzer once said, example is not the best way to influence people. It's the only way. Because what happens is you can tell people to do things, note management, or management and leadership, both, you see. But again, it's the quality of the person, isn't it? So, and if you say to them, look, you really need to do that, and then you go away and don't do it yourself, you'll breed leaders or a team that say, you really need to do that, but don't do it themselves. You see, because they'll follow your example. Whatever that example is, they will follow it. Because that's their response. That's their, because you're thought out. Some of them will say, no, I'm not following that. In which case they've just disconnected from the connection with you and leadership, because as we know, leadership is about influence and influence is about communication. It's about all those things. So we need to be good communicators, but have quality to communicate at a very deep level. And I'm quite excited about this conversation. And what happens is I get emotionally involved with it.
I see. I mean, we are almost complete on the timing because it's about a 30-minute podcast. I wanted to ask you one last thing. I have every podcast I do with somebody give me a question that they want to ask to the next guest. So you will have your opportunity to ask your next question to the next guest. But the one that was selected for you is, when you were 20, you were just starting your career. We would like to know, what would you advise yourself to make yourself a better leader today? What would have you tell at this time, at 20 years old, to make you a better leader in your life?
Learn to listen properly.
Okay. This is great. I mean, learning to listen is probably the best advice you can give to anybody. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
see it very well. I see it very well. I mean, how many times you don't want to listen you don't want to listen yourself. You don't want to listen because...
You see, learning to listen starts with learning to listen to your own heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Learning to listen to other people's hearts. What people spout forth in words is very rarely what they really want to communicate. You need to be listening to what they really want to communicate, not just what they're saying.
Yeah. And actually, what they say may not even be the real message. They probably not tell what they want to tell, and you need to read between the lines.
And watch their body language. From a coaching point of view, I like asking quirky questions, because the client cannot just come up with a slick answer to a quirky question. And it'll be a loaded question for sure. That's if I ask it. But anyway, and what I will do is I will watch their body language. One of the things that makes coaching on screen not so easy compared to somebody sitting in a chair beside me is you can't see their crossed legs. You can't see the twitches of their knees. You can't see the way their fingers suddenly do something different when you ask them a question. All you can do is really see their face and shoulders, and that's not so good. But the principle is there. You may need to ask some more questions. And just because they tell you one thing, what happens is we jump to conclusions like there's no tomorrow. A person says something and we play it according to our understanding of that word. And it's not like that at all. They come from a completely different world to us, completely different. So if we're just going by first impressions, we're going to run into so much trouble. First impressions do matter when you've learned to trust yourself properly. But listening to it, because very often the important things about a person's life come in a cluster of things that are all interlinked. And if you just take one of those things, oh, you mean this? You see? No, 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 no. So the person says, you know, I'm not getting on very well with my wife. Okay. But it's nothing to do with their wife at the end of the day. It's the way their dad shouted at his wife when they were little children, you know, and you can't put that, the wife right without putting the little children bits right. Because we have a brain that has taken in so much information and has put so much meaning on all the little bits that we have, that being able to think straight is not such an easy thing these days.
Yeah. Thank you very much for these things, Andrew. I'm sure that I wanted to ask more questions about it, but we don't have the time, Andrew, to go there, because otherwise we will spend all the day together. And,
well, you know where I am. You know
you
you can get
much.
hold of me anytime. I will have an interview
Yeah.
like this with you whenever you want. So you just
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was a great discussion. We learned a lot. And I hope people that listen us will listen with their 2 ears and their body language. Everything will be focused just on the podcast, because listening halfway, we learn that it is not as effective as it could be. Thank you very much.